Money has no place where there is no mutual relationship, either because one does not want anything from other people, or because one lives on a different plane, without any relation to them as it were, and is able to satisfy any need without any service in return. Looked at in this way, the world of money is related to the world of concrete values as thought is related to extension in Spinoza's system. It is impossible that either one should interfere with the other, because each of them expresses the whole world by itself and in its language. Thus, the total amount of value does not consist of the sum total of the value of things plus the total value of money. There is a certain quantity of value that may be realized in either form, as things or as money. If money were reduced entirely to this value and had divested itself of all coordination with valuable things, it would realize, in the field of economics, the extraordinary conception that is the basis of Plato's theory of ideas. Plato was led, by a profound dissatisfaction with the world of experience to which we are confined, to conceive a metaphysical realm of ideas outside space and time in which the real, harmonious, absolute essence of things existed. Earthly reality, therefore, became void of all real being and significance, but on the other hand, something was reflected back upon it from the realm of ideas. It had at least some part in the glowing realm of the absolute, as its faint shadow, and so it acquired a significance which was at first denied to it. This relationship is repeated and confirmed in the realm of values. The reality of things that confronts the perceiving mind is devoid of values, as we asserted at the beginning of this investigation. It develops in a form indifferent to values, often destroying what is most noble and preserving what is most base, because it does not proceed in terms of a hierarchy of worth, interests, or values. We then subordinate this natural objective existence to a hierarchy of values, constructed in terms of good and bad, noble and mediocre, precious and valueless. This construction does not in any way affect being in its tangible reality, but it is the source of all meaning that reality may have for us, and we experience it, in spite of our awareness of its human origin, as being quite the opposite of mere fancy and subjectivity. The value of things. Ethical as well as eudaimonistic, religious as well as aesthetic, hovers, like the Platonic ideas, above the world, a realm that is governed by its own alien and intangible inner norms, but that lends relief and color to reality. Economic value originates by derivation from these primary, directly experienced values, by weighing the objects in which values are incorporated against each other, so far as they are exchangeable. Within this area, however, economic value, no matter how it has constituted itself, has the same peculiar relation to the individual objects as has value in general. It is a world apart, in which the objects are classified and arranged according to particular norms which are not inherent in the objects. Objects that are ordered and related by their economic value form a cosmos that is entirely different from that formed by their natural and immediate reality. If money were really nothing but the expression of the values of things external to money, it would be related to things just as the idea, which Plato conceived also as a substantial, metaphysical entity, is related to empirical reality. The movements of money, balancing, accumulation, outflow, would directly represent the value relationship between things. The world of values, which hovers above the real world apparently unconnected yet without question governing it, would be represented in its pure form by money. And just as Plato interprets the real world, from the observation and sublimation of which the ideas have arisen, as a mere reflection of these ideas, so then do the economic relations, stages, and fluctuations of concrete things appear as derivatives from their own derivative, namely as representatives and shadows of the significance that their money equivalent possesses. No other species of values is more favorably situated in this respect than are economic values. Religious values are embodied in priests and churches, ethical social values. In administrators and the visible institutions of state power, the values of knowledge and the norms of logic, but none of these is more detached than our economic values from concrete valuable objects or processes. None is more completely the mere abstract bearer of value. In none of them is the whole world of relevant values so faithfully reflected. The development of money is a striving towards the ideal of a pure symbol of economic value which is never attained. At first, as we must clearly remember, money belongs to the same series as all other objects of value, and its concrete material value is balanced against these. With the growing need for means of exchange and standards of value, it changes more and more from a connecting link between value equations to a symbol of these equations, and thus becomes more independent of the value of its material. Yet money cannot cast off a residue of material value, not exactly for inherent reasons, but on account of certain shortcomings of economic technique. One of these has to do with money as a means of exchange. The substitution of symbolic meaning for the intrinsic value of money is made possible only by a number of factors which we noted earlier. These are that the proportion between the single commodity and the economically effective total quantity of commodities is, with certain qualifications, equal to the proportion between a certain amount of money and the economically effective total quantity of money, that the denominators of these fractions are practically but not consciously effective, since only the changing numerators are of real interest in determining the transactions, and that in this transaction a direct equation between the commodity and the sum of money appears to take place, although of course it is quite a different basis from that of the original equation between the object and the material value of money. Even if this development is accepted, it remains true that the factors arising from the respective total sums of value are situated within fluctuating limits, and the instinctively formed estimation of their size will always be rather inexact. Perhaps that is why it is impossible to do without a direct value equation between commodities and money. The portion of intrinsic material value contained in money provides the support and complementation that we need because our knowledge of the exact proportion is insufficient, otherwise an identity between the measured value and the standard, that is an intrinsic value of money, would not be required. So long as experience and economic practice show that the proposition is imprecise, the measuring process will require a certain qualitative unity of the standard and the values themselves. It may be of interest to point out a corresponding instance in the aesthetic use of precious metals. An expert reported from the London exhibition of 1851 on the differences between English and Indian gold and silverware. The English craftsman seems to have striven to incorporate the largest possible amount of metal in the smallest possible form. The Indian craftsman, however, used enameling, damascene and filigree work, etc., in such a way as to incorporate the greatest possible amount of highly skilled work in the smallest possible quantity of metal. Yet even in the latter case it is certainly not irrelevant for the aesthetic significance of the jewelry that the small amount of metal employed is precious metal. Even if this practice is carried to a point where the amount of metal has only a minimal value, this minimum still has to be of precious material for the purpose of decoration and aesthetic pleasure. The intrinsic value of the material is not important. Only the fact that the sole adequate bearer of a perfect formal relationship between the parts is a very precious material. It is, by the way, quite obvious that this attribution of the material value of money to a complementing and supporting principle with reference to the uncertain relations is only an interpretation of processes that occur in the subconscious of the economic subjects themselves. Economic interactions take place with such admirable expediency, by subtly organized dovetailing of innumerable details, that it would be necessary to assume that they were integrated by a superior mind, operating with superhuman wisdom, if one did not fall back upon the unconscious power of adaptation of the human species.